Good evening and welcome everyone. I am Catherine Jordan and this is week 15 of our conversations on community resilience in changing times. And tonight, for the first time, we have got some familiar faces if you've been following our series, because this is part 2 of our conversation on family and parenting. Our last conversation was incredibly rich and we all felt at the end of it there was just so much more. And so this is actually the first conversation that we agreed to do a part 2 to, because it just felt like there was so much more that we wanted to discuss and offer on this really important topic. So big welcome to Fred, Paola and Gemma, who are back with us for this conversation this evening. Lovely to have you with us again.
Lovely to be back. Hi, Catherine.
Hi, Fred. Hi, Paola.
Hi.
Hello. And is Gemma, she disappeared? She might have internet trouble, so Gemma is with us as well, so hopefully she'll come back in a second. Okay, so if anyone is having trouble to find us, just to say that they need to be looking on the Facebook page directly, not on the event. So if they can go onto Facebook page, Community Resilience Live Talks, you should see us live on there. Okay, so I'll just, hi Gemma, you're back. Are you having internet trouble?
Yeah, it cut out for a minute. I'm here now with you.
Okay,
Thanks.
great. Good to have you again. All right, so I'll just read the little information for our speakers again, just in case you didn't catch part 1 and you know who we are and who's speaking. So first of all, we've got Fred EHRESMANN. Fred is a specialist nurse in children, young people and family mental health. He works as an academic and a practitioner in a variety of settings. He has 2 daughters, one who's 32 and one who is 10, who dragged him kicking and screaming into awareness of our current climate crisis. And he says, there is no going back. There's no going back, is there, Fred?
I tried, but no, there's no going back.
There's no going back. And so good to have you back with us, Fred.
Thank you.
Great. And then we have Gemma Lee Morgan. Gemma has worked in early childhood education for many years and has also worked as a kindergarten teacher, a conscious parenting consultant and a holistic education consultant. She's currently enjoying applying what she has learned to being a mum of her young daughter, who is she now asleep?
Just the minute we started.
Yeah, okay. So, so yeah, lovely to have you back with us, Gemma.
Great to be here.
Great. And we also have Paola dos SANTOS. I hope I've said that right. Paola has worked with children in a home education setting in various developing countries. She also teaches yoga and runs a weekly women's group. She has recently made a big life change for her family to support her child's natural evolution. So really nice to have you back with us, Paola.
Hello.
Hello. That was a very shy hello.
Oh, shy.
Great. So we'll just dive in, if that's all right. So the first question I had as I was thinking about coming into this call this evening was, I was wondering, having done this already once before, what you were left with after our conversation, whether you looked back at it or not, I'm not quite sure. But yeah, did you have any thoughts or reflections from our first conversation? Open to any of you? Yeah, Fred?
Yes, Catherine. Afterwards, I went away realizing I'd spent an hour and a half talking about this, which is probably the longest I've ever been able to get away about talking this subject with anybody, because normally if I can have if I can have the conversation at all, it kind of it peters out generally, because they can be really, really challenging. So I was like, wow. And I felt really grateful. It was like, there we are. See, I had the conversation. I'm still alive at the end of it, and I'm going to get to go and do it again. So yeah, just real gratitude.
Oh, that's nice. And how was it for your daughter? Because I know your daughter popped in at one point. And did you have a conversation afterwards?
Oh yeah, completely. She was just really. She was really She popped in to see whether it was actually really me that she was seeing on the gadget. She kind of popped around and was like, hang on a minute, is that what? And interestingly, listening into the conversations for a bit before she went off and carried on doing what she was doing, we've had subsequent conversations together, which maybe we'll get a chance to talk about later on.
Yeah, it'd be really nice to hear. And I remember I said to you afterwards, because I was curious about how it was for her hearing her dad talk about parenting her live on a Facebook, because I thought afterwards that must be a bit confusing. So yeah, it'd be good to hear a bit more about how that was. Gemma or Paola, any thoughts or reflections on the first conversation? Yeah, Gemma?
What really stayed with me was how both of you, Paola and Fred, talked about your children's connection to nature. There were two like specific things, one that each of you said that just really stayed with me and inspired me so much. And I feel like even since then, I've really appreciated even deeper my daughter's only 1 year old, but her connection to nature also, and just how healing it can be and how connected we are. And as children, we just know that it's so innate in us. So it was really inspiring. It was such an inspiring conversation in general. And I agree with what Fred just said, like just so easy to talk for that length of time, which doesn't often happen. So thank you.
Yeah, it always amazes me how quickly that hour and a half goes. It really does seem, once we get into it, it's no time at all. It always feels like somehow we could go for a much longer. So yeah. Thanks, Gemma. Paola, anything to add?
Yeah, it wasn't so much what we talked about, but it was the impression that was left in my body, having done that and spoken about something, as I said before, that's quite an intimate subject and quite subjective, and yet, you know, there's a lot of crossover with us lot. I will share that then from that period up until this point, you know, when your family unit just isn't gelling, or there's a moment of madness, or there's some disconnect, which is obviously the yo-yo affair, the roller coaster ride that is life, is I'd sort of say to myself very momentarily, you can't go and talk about family and parenting again. It's a mess, you know, like what right do you have to go and talk about all of that? And then similarly, in the kind of the discussions that we had, I'd clock it really quickly, rein that in, and then travel off to, you know, which the next moment, which is much lighter and much more buoyant, and then a reminder that this is why you're talking about it, because of the fallibility and the vulnerability to be aware of those moments, especially in these times. And then I will say, because I did reference it to you, Catherine, I then watched Conquer Trauma, Spiritual Leadership, and I can talk about that now or later, but those three, without great detail, how much they resonated with this subject, and how in fact all of it as a whole is so interrelated.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. And I was, you know, it's difficult for me as the host and creator of this to see objectively things like that. So I really appreciated hearing how you saw that connection, and would definitely love to hear more about that. So yeah, hope I'll try and pick that up later in the conversation. Thanks, Paola. So David, I will invite in. David is with us again this evening. If he's going to pop in, it'd be good to hear what he will be doing with us this evening as part of the team.
Hello everybody, so I'm David, and I'm here to link the event as it's happening on Zoom with the event as it's being relayed into Facebook Live. So there you all are, watching us do our thing, and you will see in the Facebook event that there is a comments box, so you can write comments, appreciations, questions, and I will either pop in and speak them out loud to Catherine and her merry band of what's the word, panelists, I was going to say contestants, or I why did I say that? I'm sorry, entirely the wrong term. Or I will just write them in for Catherine to pass on. So please feel free to contribute. It really makes this much more of an event that we're doing together rather than an event that you are passively observing. And we would really love it if it was, you know, just that, a community resilience live talk. So no comment or question is too stupid. So if you hear that little voice in your head saying, no, I couldn't put that in, it's probably a sign that it really would be a good idea to put it in. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Yeah, I really agree with that. And a really important part of the kind of ethos of doing these conversations is let's get talking about these things, you know. So so that's one of the reasons they are live conversations, so that we can get you engaged and talking about this, and let's, you know, have these really important conversations. So yes, great. Thanks, David. Thanks for keeping an eye on our Facebook feed. So well, yeah, one question. So I know I spoke to you guys about some questions to explore in our conversation, and just as I was sitting with it this afternoon, there was a question that came up for me as someone who's not a parent but works with families and children. I was really interested. I mean, I was really left with an impression from our first conversation about how awesome. I was really in awe of all of you as parents. The things you were talking about, the way you show up for your kids, I was really left in awe of all three of you. And I wondered what really nourishes and supports you as parents so that you can show up fully for your children in the way you've described. Anyone want to answer that question? Gemma?
So I've actually been really exploring this, I guess, in the last week or so, really. And one of the big things for me is to feel that my daughter is supported by other people as well. She's only 1 year old, as I said, and I haven't put her in any kind of childcare. She's at home with me, and we're developing a community space. So there's a lot of people who come through the space, and it's really, really important to me that Libby has a sense of trust with the world in general, and that her father is really active with her, that she has different kinds of relationships, and for me to feel like I can take my own time and do the things that are important to me, that nourish me, that come back to myself, because so much, and I really see when I'm empty, then I can't be as present with her, I can't be as patient with her, and I feel that kind of constriction in me, and it's like, okay, I need help now, and learning how to ask for help is a really big thing. We went away for the weekend without her dad, and we were just with different friends of mine, and it was a very big experience in trusting her to be okay with other people, and it was really beautiful to see her developing those relationships, and of course she resists it. She wants to be with me all the time, but for me to give her that trust, and she went there. She was amazing, and yeah, so that's the biggest one for me.
Thanks, Gemma. Yeah, I really like that. And it sounds like you're actively creating the tribe that raises the child, which is, I think, yeah, really important.
At the moment, we're putting together a community nature kindergarten at our place to build that kind of tribe where the mothers will rotate being with the children, so that they can really feel that the different relationships that they can have, and like to grow together.
Yeah, that's great. Wonderful. Great. Thank you for sharing that, Gemma. Fred or Paola, do you want to answer anything to this question? Paola?
So I can show up for my child because I have the basics, and I really wanted to acknowledge that in my life, you know, shelter, decent money for food, just literally the basics. When I turn the tap on, the water runs. So that is something I sit with so often, and have done for 15 years. I still am in awe when the tap runs water, having been blessed to travel the world where that wasn't the case. If I show up, Arthur shows up, he shows up, and then there is nothing but nourishment. So that exchange itself with the child, that, you know, I'm so blessed to have this being that chose to come into my life. You know, everyone always says, oh, you know, he's so lucky to have you. And it's like, no, I'm the one that's lucky to have him in my life. And then one of the most important things is that I had to show up for myself and go through my ring of fire and live the things that I know that I must live, which I'm not going to go into, because if I don't live them, I will burden them on him. Because if we do not live what we're meant to live, then they feel that burden. On a very day-to-day level, heart-to-heart connections, the people that fill me with love, that I get, you know, the exchange, it's tangible. And like Gemma said, I know when I'm running a little bit on empty. And those connections, both male and female, because I need masculine energy in my life as much as I need that feminine woman. And it fills up, and yeah, then I get to share with him. My mother came today for the first time in 14 months. I mentioned sitting back again, like you said, Gemma, and watching that connection beneath the surface of words. I was completely nourished, and in ways that I can't even express, and ways that he can't even express right now, just feeling so happy. And finally, I'd say the connection with my partner, because that has been so difficult over the years, and the work that has been put in. It's the child, right? It's the masculine, feminine part of the child. And if they're not balanced and connected and loving and caring for each other, then it's fractious. And I could talk at length about that. But that's the way it works for me.
Thank you, Paola. Thanks for your honesty and sharing those things. It's like there's already a theme in what the two of you have said about knowing your own limits, knowing when you need a bit more support, knowing when you're running on empty, and, you know, having those moments to sort of call in your bigger network to support you. Fred, anything to add to this question?
Yeah, because I just think it's such a brilliant question. That why do I think it's a brilliant question? Well, it presupposes that I need nourishment and I need support, and it presupposes that I've given that some thought, and I didn't always. So this is my second time round, the being a parent wheel, and the first time round that wasn't even a thing. The idea that I need X, Y, and Z in order to deliver, you know, A, B, and C. I just thought, okay, I'm a dad. I show up. That's what I do. Crack on. That's it. Finished. You know, this time round, it's a bit more like, no, actually, she needs me to be in good shape. And being in good shape isn't just going to happen by the being in good shape fairy flying across my head and sprinkling being in good shape. I have to do stuff. So that's the first bit. So the second bit then is I have to kind of embark on that little journey of, okay, so what do I need? That's how many people actually stop and ask themselves, what do I need? How many people have just got their nose to the grindstone, running the kids to school, going to work, doing what they got to do, rushing back, picking the kids up, going home, cooking the tea, rushing around, tripping over things, tidying things up, putting the kids to bed, flopping in front of some rubbish on television, and then going unconscious, repeat. Right? That strikes me as life for loads and loads and loads of people. How many people go, what do I need? Just the notion. And when offered the opportunity to think about that, because I work with parents a lot, the response I generally get is, I haven't got time for that. I haven't got time for that. And it's like, mate, you can't not have time for that. What do they say on aeroplanes? Yeah, when the pressure drops and the mask drops down, don't put your child's mask on first. They don't say put your mask on your child. They say put your mask on yourself first. And that, you know, that. So what do? Meditation's really handy. Actually, it's very, very handy. So that, and I've got a thing that I do throughout the day. I call it a call from the universe. So I program my phone just to buzz and make a little noise at several points throughout the day, just to notify me, universe calling, stop. What's happening in this slither of time right here, right now? And it's just a reminder, I'm alive, I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out, whatever drama's going on around me, it's nothing to do with anything. It's all good, right here, right now for me in my world. So I get a call from the universe. I do stuff because I love to do it, not for any other reason. And the stuff that I do because I love to do it is play the piano. I don't play the piano in order to go and do gigs or be famous or anything. I do it because I love the feeling of my fingers on a keyboard, you know, kind of, you know, naughty secrets, if you like. That's my, you know, cherry chocolates, whatever. I do it because I love to do it. And I visit my non-human relatives really regularly. Everybody always bangs on about visiting your family. It's like, yeah, but my family's bigger than my human family. I've got my human family, but I've got my non-human family, and I need to see them lots and lots and lots. That has a big impact on me. And then finally, watch funny stuff. Basically, watch rubbish, funny stuff, laugh.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that, Fred. And that was a really good list. And I'm glad that you you sort of took to responding to that question, because it's maybe something, like you said about the parents you work with, that you maybe never think about. Is it the
Yeah, I think I do wonder how many parents even stop to think for a minute about looking after themselves, rather than being on the hamster wheel of just doing and being a parent and doing and being, just stop for a minute. And it's like, well, that's being selfish. I haven't got time. It's not about being selfish and not having time. They need us to be in good shape. That's just what they need. And so I'll come at it I won't do it for myself, but I'll do it for the kids. Okay, I'll do it for the kids then.
Yeah, great. Paola, did you want to add something to this?
Yeah, I'll just offer a counter thought on that, in that I know quite a lot of parents, and this isn't a judgment, that are addicted to their phones. And I'm not sure if that's a nourishment. And I watch some children really fragment really early in their life away from the connection that they have. So I'm guilty. We're all guilty of mobile usage, but the lesser that we can do it across the time when we're actually with them. And I watched it in babies and toddlers. Yeah, please play the piano and nourish the soul. But this addictive aspect, which is obviously across all mainstream media, and we talk about it, but we never seem to be able to break that digital onslaught that has now become literally the fabric of our civilization. That's what I wanted to add.
Thank you. Gemma, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, there's so much of what you both said that I want to just say yes to. But about the mobile specifically, it like broke my heart that at about 6 months old already, Libby was reaching for the phone. And I'm really not on my phone that much even, but it's just so part of our world. I noticed the difference when I stopped plugging it in to charge next to our bed. So it wasn't the first thing that she saw in the morning. It wasn't the first thing that I looked at in the morning. Therefore, it wasn't the first thing that she looked for in the morning. And I still feel guilty anytime I'm doing work on my phone or anything near her. And I just think there has to be a balance. Like, this is a life where we use mobiles a lot. I don't use a computer even. I just do everything on my phone. So if I need to get anything done around her, it's on my phone. But I feel like I balance it with us being outside, us dancing together, us singing together, us playing guitar together, us doing yoga together, like all of these things. But it's like, okay, this is part of life. But the more that I also resist it, then the more she's going to feel the pull towards it. So for me, it's like, if she reaches for the phone, I let her play with the phone. She holds it, she presses things, she gets excited when something happens. And then I take it away and we move on. And I think it's the same with everything, like eating certain foods. There's certain foods that I don't give her and I don't want to give her. I don't ever want to give her chocolate, but likelihood is that's not going to happen. So that gives space for it. I think that there's enough other good stuff that balances it.
Thank you, and thanks for naming that kind of balance then, because it is such a big part of our world, isn't it? And it's, I would like to think that as parents you don't give yourself a big slap over the head about using your phone, but do you, Fred, you give yourself a big slap over the head?
Well, what I wanted to respond to was Paola and Gemma, you both said, you know, like sentences, and in those sentences are the words, I feel guilty. And I heard those and it's like, yeah, I feel guilty. So one of the things that I get nourishment from, and that's kind of, don't want to be a meditation salesman, like whatever gets you into that space where you can catch yourself being a certain way, whatever it is, right? So what I'm getting at is feeling guilty and being a parent just go hand in hand together. They just do. And the thing about that is it's okay, because it keeps me on my toes. Is this okay? You know, not the bashing myself around the head kind of thing, but just, okay, I'm feeling guilty. Let's check in with that for a minute. Is that valid? Yeah, actually, I'm slobbing out a bit here. Do I need to slob out? Yes. Right. Well, put your feet up. Is it okay to slob out? No, actually, you're doing this because you can't be asked. Come on, sort yourself out. You know, and it's to have permission not to be asked. You know, not to. We're doing the best we can with what we got as parents. I do really fully believe that, generally speaking, parents get out of bed in the morning wanting to be the best parents they can be. I don't think parents get up and it's like, right, my mission for the day is to be a really dreadful parent, to really screw my kids up. That is my mission. I don't think people consciously wake up on that mission. Even though they look like they might be screwing up their kids, it's not their mission to do it. It's ending up that way for various other reasons. So bags of compassion, truckloads of compassion.
Yeah,
that's all about that. The kind of I heard the guilt thing, and I thought I just wanted to say.
No, I'm glad you picked up on it, because I really noticed it as well. I really noticed those words, and I think I did say to a parent not very long ago, like, it seems to be no way to get through being a parent without really, really messing up and feeling terrible a lot of the time. So did you want to add something? Oh, look, everyone wants to say something.
And we're off.
Gemma, did you want to go first?
Well, it was actually one of the things that stayed with me from last time that I really implemented was Paola saying that she catches herself when maybe you can clarify exactly what you said. It was like something like when you feel like you've done something wrong, just clearing that thought.
Yeah.
Really implemented it in the last month. Just like whenever I am feeling guilty, just release it. This is what happened. This is what the situation called for. This is the best that came out of me. Now come back to the next moment to do something different instead of getting stuck there in that moment. And like passing that on to her.
Yeah, great. Paola, do you want to add something?
Well, I'll go from there, which is, you know, Fred's meditation practice. You know, I think many of us probably do have. supports that. After all, meditation it's an evolution, right? It evolves the human being, sometimes at a rapid speed if we've got a real teacher kicking our ass, in which case the awareness grows at a fundamental rate that is like insane. So what one starts to notice is those things, and in noticing you can catch yourself and not feel guilty about the guilt. You know, let's not layer it, but just to catch it nicely and wash it away with whatever the wash is. But there's one other thing, and that was a reflection actually, and potentially a friend watching who mentioned, and it was quite an interesting comment that he made to me directly after watching this, was around the identification of being a parent. And it's very rare that I identify myself in that way. You know, this is very specific situation that we're talking about being one. You know, I don't wake up in the morning thinking, oh, parent that, you know, it's like, it's an attachment to a role that actually gets in the way sometimes of fundamentally showing up for yourself, if you've got that layer of this is my parent ways. I'm probably not explaining very well, but it was something around identifying with that rather than just the human that, you know, just happens to have an offspring.
I mean, and what you're really all talking about is you just have a real depth of self-awareness, and you know, and that's really what I'm hearing is a foundation to what enables you to kind of show up for your children in that way. Is you're beginning with yourselves, right? You're doing your own work, and then that's filtering into being a parent. So yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I feel like the next question I had was kind of a bit of a nice lead on from that, which is about authentic and honest communication. So I'm curious, you know, that was something else I picked up from our last dialogue, is that something you were all speaking to, is, you know, how you were talking about the relationships with your children, particularly Fred and Paola, the dialogue you mentioned, both of you, you know, the honesty you were having in the conversations you were having with your children. How important is that? And how important is it, particularly in terms of facing the challenges we're facing on a sort of global level? Anyone want to go? Yeah, Fred?
It depends. It depends on lots. So for example, depends on the age of the child. You know, their developmental stage, their emotional stage, their capacity for understanding stuff. So there's one depends bit of the jigsaw puzzle. It depends on, say for me, how emotionally regulated I am or not. Yeah, so it's really not helpful authentically freaking out in front of my child and not regulating and all the rest of it. It's like, that's authentic communication. Yeah, but might not be helpful. So, you know, it depends. The principle of it, of course, but there's, you know, yeah, I think that would be my kind of starting point, is like there's a few bits and pieces, because they need us to help them regulate themselves. That's kind of really what they're looking for to start with, as they learn to regulate themselves. So I need, you know, discernment. I need to have a lot of discernment around, okay, this is not for now, this is for later, you know. And maybe if I'm in a bit of a state, authentic communication might look like something along the lines of, look, I'm in a bit of a state right now, I need to go and sort myself out, let's pick this up when I've sorted myself out. That'll do, for example.
Yeah, thanks, Fred. I appreciate that. But yeah, just discernment, I think that was the key word that really stood out for me. Is, yeah, it's not always appropriate to share everything. I get that. That really makes, yeah, that really, everyone's like shaking their heads. Gemma, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I actually, I mean, you said that it's age appropriate. So most of my work is working with from 1-year-olds to 6-year-olds, and I practice authentic communication with them. I especially with like the pre-verbal stage, 0 to 3s, and I find it to be I find it actually much easier to have authentic communication with that age than with adults or teenagers or any other age. Even when I'm in an emotional place, to be able to express what I'm feeling clearly with that age, I find really, really easy. I find they can hear it and accept it, and I'm modeling it for them as well. Like, I see their crying as authentic communication. And so also my reflection of that, like, it's kind of giving a framework, giving language to what they're experiencing. And getting into their world. There's times when my daughter will put her hand over my mouth, so I understand I'm talking too much now. But I find, like, to give words to experience is really, really important. And starting from birth, I feel I've seen the immense impact of it. I've seen how children really understand what you're saying. They understand the energy of it, and they're able to kind of hold themselves in a different way.
Thanks, Gemma. Thank you. I particularly love that, just what you mentioned about her putting her hand over your mouth, just that, you know, you picking up those cues of what your child is telling you, which I imagine is a really big part of it. Paola, do you want to add anything to this?
It's such a big one, and it's so multifaceted, and yeah, it's all about the different ages. But I think, again, it's taking back to myself. Do I have an authentic, honest conversation with myself? Because if I start peeling back the layers of stuff in me, then from where I'm starting from, I can hear what's meant to be said or shared, and the discernment in that moment. And then obviously you have this really exciting aspect that it's not all verbal. And we're such a westernized verbal culture. And, you know, Arthur, my son and I have been we have such silent moments where we can really eat in silence and enjoy our food consciously, without sounding crazy. We sometimes, you know, we hear each other's thoughts. We don't need to speak it. If we commune with nature in that way, we can commune with each other in that way through the energetic body. And for me, truth has a time and a place. It has a moment. So just because that is truth, it does not mean that it needs to be shared on that day of this year. There are certain things in my life that I would never contemplate sharing, not yet. And then there are some things that I probably have overshared and learned. And then that takes us back to some of the trauma that you talked about, because children know how to de-traumatize themselves if you goddamn allow it and get out of the way, because of too much being shared at certain moments in front of him. We've spoken to each other in dreams. He's woke, shared a dream I've been told off. He doesn't know what his dream's about. I know what his dream's about, and it is an absolute stop it to me. And it's on my knees for the next 24 hours, figuring out how to figure out what he said and implement a new way for that moment. yeah, it's ongoing work, and we could write books and books and books on it, because it's the new ways penetrating as we become more sensitive beings.
Thank you so much, Paola. I'm just going to hand over to David for a minute. Something's just come up for me that I need to go and quickly pop and do. So David's going to come in and host the next question. David, are you with us?
Yes, I am here. So before I pose a question, I have a couple of comments from one Monica EHRESMANN. So I think that might be someone you know, Fred. And first of all, I think it's important to have a gentle honesty about death. And we've always been very candid about death when the conversation came up, even when our daughter was younger. And then a further comment from the same person. I think it's the basis of all future conversations about the challenges we are having. So I was just wondering whether that might provoke any comments from any three of you, or whether you'd just like to go straight into the next question.
What was the question, Dave? An honest conversation about death.
So, well, I was just reading the comments about talking about death to children, and I was just wondering whether that would provoke any thoughts or comments from you guys.
Yeah, I've had quite a few conversations with around 4-year-olds about death. 4 is usually the age they start to discover death. And I find it really fascinating. When it comes to any topics like this, I like to ask them a lot of questions. So rather than like the first time it came to me, a girl had discovered, she'd been to the zoo with her parents and seen a dinosaur exhibition. So she asked, why were the dinosaur bones there? They said dinosaurs died. And she said, do humans die? And her parents were caught unaware and said no. and then she started to cry. And they spent the rest of the weekend kind of trying to dig themselves out of this hole that they dug. And so her and I spent a lot of time talking about it. I left it up to her to come to me to talk to me about it. She knew that her dad had shared it with me. And when she brought it up, I just asked her question. I said, do you think we die? And she said, yes. And I understood from the way that she told the story that she had cried because her parents had lied about it. And so then she felt that there was something wrong with it. And so we talked about, like, I asked her, no, she kind of, it was like she was processing all this different information that she'd gotten. But then I was asking her more and more questions to kind of pull out her own understanding of it and her own wisdom and her own, where she sat with it. And there were really beautiful things that she said, that she talked about. And then as the rest of the class discovered death throughout the year, she was there to kind of help them with it. And there were lots of different responses to it. Empathy, sadness, fear. But I found it really important to give a space for it all and to help them to process their emotions around it, because it is part of life, and it's not something that we need to hide from or actually be scared of. They asked me once if my grandmother was dead, and so I told them the story of how my grandmother died from the perspective of really that she was ready to die. She was really happy to be dying. It was sad for me because I love her and I wanted her here with me, but for her I was happy because she had lived a really full life. And one of the 4-year-olds, after I told the story, a few hours later, he came to me and said, Gemma, tell me again the story of your grandma. And I told him again, and he said, I'm sad for you. And I was like, that's really beautiful of you. Thank you. I'm okay though. And he said, okay, but I'm still sad. And Yeah, I think it's an amazing process that children go on, discovering death, and how we can hold the space for that, you know, in a really loving and accepting.
Sorry, Gone. I thought you finished. Gone. Thanks, Gemma. I really appreciate what you've just said, and I know this is something that you mentioned in the first one, Paola. I think you did touch on this, didn't you? Did you want to add anything to that?
I think it's an ongoing journey that we all take, and I think it evolves as the human evolves, and I think the fear lessens as the human has more awareness of itself, and who wants to live forever, eh? Bloody hell. We were in the park yesterday and there was a bird behind a tree. Arthur went to urinate and there was a bird dying, and he had such a moment with it, and it wasn't beautiful, you know. He was a bit dizzy. He says he sees things around it. The bird was like, you know, last breath sort of thing. You know, I'm not going to go in there telling him about how people think there's an eternal soul, and we've talked about the Buddhist religion, and that just came up, and that was of great fascination. Originally, I used to talk about going back into the earth, because he'd always talk about the body and where it goes. And his journey through, again, I've never pushed yoga or meditation on this child. In fact, I've kept him at a distance, but he's found it himself. And through that, he's having every now and again sort of little illuminating moments where he's like, I understand why you're not so scared of it now. But then we'll sink back into the fear, because we all do in a sense somewhere. But yeah, it's an enriching conversation that the West needs to have a lot more, because it's not right in front of us, is it, the way we do it? And Fred brought it up last time as well, because of his daughter's comment. I think that's
right. Yeah, he did. Yeah, and I'm just wondering particularly for you, Gemma, you're in Israel, just to mention, and Paola, my sense is you have much awareness of other traditions that I think do death better than the English. Am I correct? I don't know. What's it like? I mean, what's it like in Israel, particularly? I'm wondering what's Israeli culture like around death compared to English culture?
Wow, it is different, because death is quite present here. And it means that life is a bit more present, like day by day, which is something that I've always really liked about it. But there's also a lot of fire here. So like a lot of life, a lot of aggression, a lot in every moment. But death, wow, it's really hard to know. I think mainstream culture, I'm thinking about how it's taught to children. Mainstream culture really kind of brainwashes children to want to go into the army. So it's kind of a macho thing that after the army, a lot of people have to kind of reprogram, get rid of that. But there's a big honoring of death. I mean, there's a whole day devoted to the Day of Remembrance is devoted to the people who have died in wars. There's a lot of sadness. yeah, a lot of sadness attached to it, and a lot of like, I don't know. I don't love the way that it's dealt with here or seen. I don't find it to be.
Go on, struggling to find the right words. Yeah, I can see.
I find it to be quite dramatic.
Okay.
You know, the victim, the aggressor, or the rescuer. It's very much in the triangle. Like it's yeah. I don't think it's so much awareness around it.
Yeah.
But it is.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think Paola mentioned about traveling a lot. I traveled a lot in my early 20s, and it gave me so much more perspective on English culture in terms of death. I also never take it for granted when I turn on a tap and there's water. Having spent quite a bit of time in Peru, where their whole day was taking up getting some drinkable water for their family. You know, when you've experienced things like that, it puts our lives in a very different perspective. And I think in our culture, I think we're particularly bad at dealing with death. I think, you know, I recently, 2 or 3 weeks ago, a friend of mine died. I dealt with the dead body. I was the person that checked if they were alive or dead. For me, it felt me really okay. I've dealt with death quite a lot. I feel very comfortable with death. But I really noticed how once the ambulance people turned up, they hid it all quickly, you know, hide it away, like, so nobody saw what was going on. And I was really struck by that. And I thought, wow, we really move very quickly in this culture to hide death. I really noticed, it just really stood out to me in that experience a couple of weeks ago. Fred, do you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, it was your description there, because I'm a nurse. And there is a thing in nursing around protecting the dignity of the dead person. So sometimes the way kind of medic type people, say nurses, go about what they do around the dead person can be, you know, they're doing their best and as we've said, in a culture that doesn't even talk about death. You know, and of course, when you go into nursing, it's like, look, get with the program. You're definitely going to come across this subject. Where there's suffering going on, there'll be a nurse around to alleviate the suffering. It's I think that's what we're about. So it's a funny old thing, really. You know, that kind of like, okay, here's this dead person, they're busy being dead, and there's all these other people busy doing what they're doing. What are we going to do? Okay, let's just protect their dignity so people don't gawp at them or something. It's I suppose what I'm speaking to is we don't have ritual. We don't have a tradition of, okay, death is a thing. Okay, it's a thing. Therefore, this is how it works. We've got, don't talk about death. It's not a thing. You're not going to die. You know, of course you're not going to die. You're going to live forever. You know, we kind of screech to a halt at a certain point. You know, and when there are conversations about death, it's nothing to be frightened of. Yes, it is. For ages, I was terrified of the idea of not existing. I don't want to be told it's nothing to be scared of. I want to be validated. And then when I'm validated, yeah, that's really normal to be terrified. Is it? Yeah. Okay, it'll pass then. You know, all those kind of conversations about, I feel really sad. You know, oh, don't worry, they've gone off to the big unicorn field in the sky and they're going to eat lollipops all day. And it's just like, what? Oh, so I don't need to be sad? No, you don't need. No, sad's really normal. Sad's really normal. Do you need to cry? Yeah. Okay, here's the tissues. There's so much in that subject around approaching feelings and authentic communication, you know, flowing with feelings as they come up and letting them be there and letting them move on, and death being the big one.
And something you just mentioned there, which really stood out to me, is just normalizing different emotions, which I think we're really bad at in England. You know, like certain emotions are okay, 1, 2, and 3. The rest of it, you know, it's just not welcome. So yeah, I imagine, you know, as in terms of being a skillful parent, normalizing different emotions and experiences is a really important part of being a skillful parent. I wonder if I can move this conversation on to the next question, if that's all right. I just wanted to, because this feels like a really important question as well, is like, how do we balance the inner wisdom of our children with the challenges we're facing in the world? You know, how do we kind of nurture and allow that to come to the surface in a way that probably includes a bit of discernment, as has been mentioned, and balance that somehow with the challenges of what's happening in the world right now? Yeah, anything come to mind for that, Fred?
I just saw Paola's hand go up. I don't know if you want to go first, Paola.
I don't mind. It is that discernment, and you know, I'm not going to stream the news to a 10-year-old. Well, A, because I worked in the news, so I know what it wants to do sometimes. And you know, I've sat in a PR boardroom many times and listened to how the tobacco industry is going to create the new generation of smokers. So through media, and he watches it sometimes, and he has a bodily reaction, and then we turn away, because I don't think it is entirely necessary right now. He knows what's happening. If he's in tune with himself, he knows what's happening. He understands the climate issues, and we look at it in depth. You know, we've seen documentaries, we've talked about it from a geological perspective rather than just a human damaging perspective. We've looked at all the perspectives, not just it's humans versus climate believers and climate deniers. We've looked at the whole range so that he can figure it out and what his role is. I think the one thing that we're always looking at is, especially now we're opening up in terms of coming out of this year-long retreat, because he's a different person. It was a retreat. It wasn't 2 weeks in the Himalayas, it was a year. And I can go into detail at some point. He's not the same. He's an empath, he feels more. It's off the scale what he feels. Therefore, the discernment I'm currently having to figure out with him is that my feeling, or is that someone else's, or is it the collective's, or is it what I've just watched on the TV? And then drawing it back to him and figuring out how to have that resilience back to himself. He can't watch old films, listen to old music, unless it has a timeless quality. He's like, it's not there. It just simply isn't, Mom. It makes me feel really mucky. And it feels like I shut down. It goes back very quickly to spiritual leadership, because isn't necessarily having a cohort of followers. Spiritual leadership to me is when the leader is spirit, and whatever you want to say spirit is, the energetic connection, the life force, the prana, the chi, the divine, whatever God, whatever you want to call it, is when it is the leader in you. And looking at it from that sacred perspective of listening to that part and coming back to that part, after being open to the world and then coming back. And it really is, at the moment, as a 10-year-old who's flourishing, what I was going to say before wasn't about death, it was about sexuality. We don't have a ritual when a boy's testicles drop. We don't have a ritual because his Adam's apple's growing. I'm having to sit with new ways of dealing with this, you know, without interfering too much. And yeah, I think aligning that sacred part of him, and strengthening that part of him is where we're going day to day.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you for naming the sexuality thing. Totally agree with that. I'm sure the others here will agree with that. And oh, what else was I going to say about what you just said? Oh, it just completely went from my head. Ta-da! Host blank spot. I started then thinking about the sexuality. No, I've completely forgotten. Fred, over to you. I've just gone.
Okay. It's such a great question. Again, it's just a really lovely question because it presupposes inner wisdom in children. Okay, and of course the paradigm that we're born into at the moment presupposes no such thing. Okay, the paradigm that we're born into is there's this whole conversation about children and who they are and what childhood is. There's this whole narrative about it, you know, and the first step is being able to step outside of that and go, oh, actually, that's just the lens. There's another lens over here. If you look through that, children have wisdom. Oh, blimey. So that's the first thing. The second thing is like, okay, is it wisdom when I agree with it? Is it wisdom when I go, God, that's really wise? Because I'm in a real position of power in relation to children. So how do I know it's wisdom, right? Because I approve of it and I think, oh, that's really wise. You're a wise kid. And then suddenly it's not wisdom when I don't agree. Oh, no, that's not very wise. How do we know whether children are being wise or not? And how do we know what their wisdom actually is? For me, is the kind of starting point, because I caught myself approving of my child, you know, having those kind of approving, proud feelings and kind of like, okay, step back a bit. Is that actually wise? Is that, it's back to discernment again, really. Just kind of like, oh God, this is really tricky stuff, isn't it? You know, and then balanced against what the paradigm would say, you know, you've heard people say, oh, they're way beyond their years, aren't they? You know, that kind of phrase. Oh, are they way beyond their years? Who says? It's like, that's really deep, lovely stuff. Why can't that come from the mouth of a 7-year-old? Why do you have to wait until they're 57 and screwed up their life 5 times before they come out with that sentence? Best come out with it at 7. So I think, how do we, for me, it's kind of being in that space of wondering, kind of seeing the paradigm, being willing to step outside of the paradigm and kind of go, okay, my child actually has a capacity for wisdom. I know that. And then being, so what does that look like then? And being willing to go, God, I don't actually know. I just know that sometimes my child says stuff and it touches me here and I get a lump here. And so maybe it's not about whether I agree with it or not up here. It's whether something happens in my body. There's like a signal like, oh, this person said something really important. And then to communicate that and encourage it when it's there. And the second bit is being there to catch them when they are actually definitely not being wise. You know, when a 14-year-old is saying, I know where the crack house is, I'm going to go. It's like, that's not wise. I need to step in here now. Okay, because this is kind of life and death stuff. You know, allow them to be unwise and work out what the wisdom is. What a great question. Sorry, I'll shut up now.
No, thanks. I love the way you explored that question, Fred. That was just like so interesting to me. I really love the way you explored that question. Thanks so much. Yeah, no, I don't ever want to say more than that. I think you said it all really in the way you explored it. I have remembered the thing I was going to say to Paola, so I'll just say that one before that goes out of my head, was I really appreciate how you were supporting your child to know the difference between his reactions and the collective and what someone else is. Like, I have never heard anyone talk about supporting a child to understand that. And of course, it's so important. I didn't understand that until I was in my late 30s and I'd done 10 years of therapy work, you know, like to support a child to know that at that age, I think is absolute gold. So I just like, my heart lit up when you said that. I was like, oh, how wonderful to know there's parents like you in the world who are like, you know, encouraging children to know that and to know the difference. So yeah, thank you. Again, you're inspiring me. Gemma, did you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, that was all awesome. Yeah, I think the biggest, wow, everything Fred said was so accurate for me, like that it's the feeling rather than the agreeing. What's often the wisest is the thing that we don't agree with, because it opens our mind to something new. For me, it's giving a space of listening to them and inquiring into what they think about things, and like giving value to what they think, giving value to their opinions, giving value to their ideas, understanding that everyone has different gifts to share and different perspectives, and like having a conversation with a group of 4 or 5-year-olds is the most amazing thing, because it's the time, according to chakra development, the 4 to 5 is the throat chakra, so it's when they start to really speak their truth. And it's amazing, like just seeing the different perspectives coming out and teaching them how to honor and listen to each other. And that's like, I feel like that's just the most important thing. For me, that's the most important thing in our world, like how to stay connected to yourself, but also listen to the collective, and find that balance and know yourself, know your boundaries. What Paola was saying, exactly, like know what's mine and what's outside of me.
Yeah, thanks, Gemma. Thanks for that. Oh, great. Thank you for your answers. I feel like I need some time to percolate them, but I can't because we've got to move on. So, so I will move on to the next question. The question, so this is a question that came out of something that Fred said, and I thought it'd be really nice for us to explore. Fred mentioned something around opportunities that climate collapse presents with our relationship with our children. Fred, would you like to, as you sort of talked about that, would you like to say more about that? And then maybe we can kind of lead in a bit more from the others, what they might have to add to that.
Yeah, sure. I just have to dig around in my memory for a minute to think, what the hell was I on about?
What were you on about?
What? Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. That's what it is. It's about, oh, gosh. You know that thing about the lotus? Oh, we're not allowed to swear. What's the non-swear word for the swear word thing that I'm not allowed to say because otherwise it gets labeled as explicit content? You know what I mean? Yeah, that. Yeah, so lotus feeds on that. Okay, that's not very nice. Okay, it's very often the thing that the kids call the bad thing. Okay, there's the bad thing. There's the not very nice thing, this thing here that's like, yeah. And then there's the lotus. No purr, no lotus. So it's that really, it's that kind of opportunity. It's like, okay, here's this thing there, like, yeah, that's pretty rubbish. That is just, there's no getting away from it. That just looks rubbish. So where's the lotus then in there? And so the opportunities, well, we've been speaking to some of that already, haven't we? About, you know, when there's this thing here. So we've talked about, for example, being able to talk about the fact that the death rate in human beings is 100%. Just saying, and being able to have that conversation, and that's made possible by what children are seeing in front of them and what they're seeing all around them. It's like it's a non-dodgeable bullet, really. It's just, so for example, and then, you know, Paola, you know, you were talking about the collective, you know, I use the word paradigm, you know, there's this thing that we've been dropped into and sold since we popped out of the womb. It's like, here's life, here's the thing, that's what it is, crack on, you know, and suddenly it's like, no, here is not life, here is not the thing, let's not crack on, because look, it's just totally broken. That's a massive opportunity for who we really are as a species, what we're actually really about, to emerge. So there's me opening gambit. There's me opening ramble on that one.
Thank you. Excrement were you talking about?
Ah, that's the word. Oh yeah, one syllable, 4 letters is a lot better though. I mean, how many syllables has excrement got in it? I say that one word in 4 syllables and suddenly YouTube goes bump.
Oh, it's so funny. I was like, it's a good job I was on mute because I was cracking up. It was just so funny watching you trying to find another word for it. Oh, brilliant. Paola, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I've probably lost it now. Let me go back to my thought. I'm thinking about excrement now, which we've been doing a lot of because he's had a little bit of constipation. That certainly grounds you when you've seen poo in different forms for many, 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 many years. I feel like the opportunity, as we've discussed, really, the opposite side of death is life, right? So if you're facing this more alive communication with death, and not just through us, right? The death of various species and plants and Lord knows what else. And like you said, Gemma, you feel that life is slightly more vibrant in a place where death perhaps occurs slightly more. How do we spend our time? Who do we want to commune with and where? And when you feel that aliveness and connection to how lucky that we have our breath, I mean, the virus that we don't really mention, you know, it takes our breath. So where are we breathing? And the conversations that have come out specific of climate change as a broad subject, like I've said, is Ice Age. What happened there? Who was there? We weren't there. They were there. The viruses were also in the ice. You know, it's all these different levels of life that has been. And we're so arrogant, aren't we? You know, we really talk about the last 100, 200, 300, 2,000 if we're lucky years. But yeah, I feel like it's something to do with the opportunity is to live it now. And that's alive in me. So unfortunately, that's what he has to contend with. I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Paola. Yeah, and that reminds me of what Fred said in the first one about, you know, is it really important that you've left your bedroom in a mess, or is it important that we spend time, you know, quality time with each other and build memories? You know, that's something that comes to mind. Yeah, thank you. Gemma, do you want to add something to this one?
Yeah, I feel like also the things that disturb us the most are like the triggers for the place where we bring our most creativity and where we bring our change. Like that's like the red light that tells us, like, yeah, there's the work. That's what I'm here for. And it's just about transforming that, the energy from, it can be a place of sadness or a place of anger or a place of frustration, into that life force that can turn into creating something new.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Gemma. Thank you. So we're not far off the end, and I've got one question I'd like to explore before we finish. Before we do, Paola, can I just check back in with you about when you mentioned about how the other conversations have linked into parenting? Would you just like to say a little bit more about that?
Oh yeah, I think I referenced a couple, but it was conquer. I think your conversation before was about, you know, competition and conquering each other, and that, you know, I remember when Arthur was little, and various people in my life said, "It's a battle of wills. You need to break his will," and it really didn't sit very well. And So when you were discussing this whole conquer thing, it's like, well, if people out there are professing to conquer the, you know, to kill off their child's will, I mean, as a baby, let alone as older, that kind of conquering mentality is going to be prolific. Because you were conquered by your parent. And I remember as well going onto a bus in London, and I think he was doing something, and I wasn't ignoring him. It was passing through him, you know. I wasn't sort of like telling him off or anything. And again, someone came up and said, you know, you can train them better than that. And it was a real aggressive conquering. And this is spoken from the mouths of both man and woman. You know, we all think that that's the masculine way, but in fact, there was the feminine, there was the female, also suggesting I should smash his will. It really came up when I was listening to that, because it starts from there. You know, I'm going to fight back. And the trauma one was, he was in school for two years, which was a terrible affair, and he needed to de-traumatize after that. I knew he could do it himself, and watching that happen was pretty horrific on some levels. But I just would stand back, and I'm not going to go into detail how it came out, but it would be tears, frustration, anger, and we'd speak now as a 10-year-old. Oh, it's almost gone. The cracks almost come out from those years, Mom. You know, that's again, it's let them do it. You know, let them de-traumatize. And I think the cues that people see is like, oh, don't do that. Don't express that. Don't sit in that. Don't over emotionalize something where in fact they know what they're doing. They have a sat nav, and their sat nav is better than the one in the car. You know, they know where to navigate with their emotions. And finally, spiritual leadership, which for me is always about leader as spirit. And I think as parents, if we're in touch with that part of ourselves, then we're in good. Then we're in a reasonable place for them to be in touch with themselves.
Thank you. I think that was something Justine mentioned actually, is about motherhood being a really good example of spiritual leadership. So yeah, thanks for sharing your reflections on that. I really appreciate it, and it's nice to hear that the conversations as a whole are kind of becoming different facets of something. So yeah, nice to hear that. Okay, so I'll just ask our last question for this evening. So what do you feel is the most important consideration for parents and families during this very changeable time? What's the top card really in terms of, yeah, what feels like the most important consideration? Fred?
Well, you could see me kind of going, that's a tough question. Well, the first thing it popped into my head was, I just thought, well, it depends on how much or how little privilege the families we're talking about have got. Because you say families, and it's just like, I'm aware that across the whole of the planet, it's just like, okay, so for some people, it's like staying alive. Okay, top priority, and it's happening now. Ooh, I hate having that thought, because it's real and it's true, and there's nothing right now I can do about it. So, you know, but that's something I can do, like is to be willing to have the thought and to have the feeling. And then, okay, they haven't got bombs and stuff going around, but they still don't have water, or they don't have somewhere stable. Yes, so that's a top priority for a whole bunch of families there. Okay, now parachute back over here to England, completely different, whole different ball game altogether. So that's the best I could come up with. It just really, really, really does depend on where people are on the planet right now at this particular moment. And I think that lens for us here, where we don't have that stuff going on, I feel that's an important lens for me to have as I start to work out what I think my top priorities are, and what I need to be making a big fuss about. Put that lens on. Maybe I don't really need to be making a big fuss about that. There's kind of something else. And to be honest, I haven't worked it out. It's kind of like a work in progress, really. When I went on a retreat and I went to be around my non-human relatives, just asking, I need a friend here, please, because nothing from Homo sapiens is making any sense to me. Just like a little whisper, start at home. Okay, I'll start at home and build from there. I'm sorry, that's a kind of a bit vague. And
no, I really appreciate the things you've named, and as you know, Paola mentioned, and I mentioned a little bit, you know, that I spent time working with families in a very, very deprived area of Peru, and literally the whole day's task for the two parents was to get one bucket of drinkable water for their family. That was it. The whole day was taken up. They had to get it first of all, then, you know, then there was a certain amount for the whole village.
Yeah.
So they had to get enough for their family. Then they had to make it drinkable because it wasn't drinkable. And that was literally the whole day's task, was just getting one bucket of drinkable water for their family. And that has left a forever impression on me, you know, in terms of how we take that for granted in England. So thank you for naming that, because I think it's always important to acknowledge how absolutely privileged we are in this country, particularly.
And so just on what popped in my head, listening to that and kind of having the picture in my head thinking, God, well, actually, what's the most important consideration for me when you say that is I'm here and they're there. And like, what am I doing? My internet went out this morning and I was bouncing off the walls. Like, lots of work to be done at home.
Yeah, and I think, and that's the other thing. I mean, for me, for me, remembering that, I think, is a really important thing. And yeah, remembering that there are people in incredibly challenging situations.
Yeah.
Like, yes, I can't directly affect that person, but I can remember them in my heart, and that's the way I deal with it. But it's not, but also having a space of like, and I don't know how I can really help, or is that really what's needed to help in some way? You know, like, is that really what's needed? Because that's often our motivation, is to sort of do something about it, and then feel powerless when we can't. So, and I just wanted to, the other thing you touched on is bringing it home, which I really resonate with. And I think no matter what our situation, whether it's with a family or not, bringing it home, like what's our kind of, what are we doing at home? What's our direct life situation? How are we looking at resilience and adaptability? How are we connecting with our neighbours? Do we know the people on our street? You know, like, I really appreciate you naming that. That's something that's my version of community resilience right now, is I'm getting to know my neighbours, and we're looking at how we can kind of support each other more as a really local community, because it's got to begin where we are, I think. So yeah, thank you. Gemma, do you like to add something?
Yeah, I feel like it's about presence. Like, that's the priority for me, or what I believe is the priority in general. Like, to be present in our experience, whatever it is, because we can always be comparing ourselves to anything from the worst to the best in our opinion. When I spent time in India, there were people who were living really, really, really simply, who would give everything that they had to help someone. And they were happy, so happy. And it really, the time that I spent there changed my entire understanding of my relationship with money, my relationship with human beings, with nature, with everything. To be in presence of connection, of the moment, of whatever is, to trust the moment, to know our strength in the moment, to do what is required of us in the moment.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and in a way it's really simply said, and that's all that needs to be said, isn't it? Yeah, thank you, Gemma. Paola, anything to add to this?
Well, it is a test, isn't it, in the moment of it's exactly it. It's sort of, you know, I've never had this kind of conversation, certainly not live on the internet. It's like, what is needed in the moment. And yeah, I agree, it all comes from that magical space of the moment, whether you do act, whether you don't act, whether it's a witnessing moment, a prayerful moment, a moment of action. And I can only be present when I have my own personal center of gravity. So when my power is down here, not up here, not down there, but right in the middle. And when I lose that center of gravity, my family usually loses its center of gravity, because this amazing thing called the feminine, which we don't talk about really, but that feminine aspect that is very quiet, passive, powerful, and gives birth, needs to be grounded and centered on the planet. And if I can do that, I turn from fear into love. And as wishy-washy as the word love can be, it's a nuclear power station. And with that love and in that love, things can be born.
Yeah, thank you so much, Paola. Thank you so much. Wow, amazing. It's like, wow, we've done another hour and a half. We could still do more, right? But we are going to have to finish. But thank you. So much more richness, I think. Just want to add a couple of comments from our live audience. One is from Tuomo. I hope I've pronounced your name right. Sorry if I haven't. Who just said, I've really enjoyed the conversation. It's really shot down a lot of my ideas as a non-parent about what having a family would be like. So thank you for that comment. And also another comment says about the death conversation. The collective shadow about death is being borne by our youngsters. The possibility of not living to old age, yeah, so that they're kind of hosting that really, yeah, which I really, yeah, I agree with. And so thank you for that comment. Thank you very much, ladies and gents. Again, really appreciate your time and your wisdom and your honesty and your musings on these questions, and Fred for really dissecting the questions in a really interesting way. I appreciated having that mirror. So thank you for that. So so just to mention, next week we are doing part 2 to our Dismantling Conquest conversation. If you're interested in it, please do watch part 1, because part 1 is kind of illuminating conquest mentality in Western civilization, and I think it's really insightful what's in that first conversation, and then kind of inviting us to sort of explore it in our lives. And then we're going to do a bit more of the kind of how to actually work with it in ourselves in the part 2. So if you're interested in that topic, do watch part 1 and then join us for next week for part 2 of that. And then we're going to be having 3 more part 2 conversations after that. One is conquest and transformation. The other is part 2 of work and money. And we're also doing part 2 of food resilience. We've got a really exciting man who is joining us on that conversation, who wasn't a part of the first one. He's got 25,000 followers on YouTube, and he is doing this, he calls it My Family Garden, and he's doing resilience work, challenging racism with gardening, and like, he's really lovely, interesting guy. So I'm really looking forward to having him on our conversation. So lots more to come, lots more exciting conversations to come. And then we will be having a 4-week break for June, which will be the end of our pilot series, and then we will launch our official series on the 6th of July. So so yeah, thanks again to you lovely lot for joining us, and go well. What did you say, Gemma? I think it cut out. I still didn't catch what you said, sorry.
Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you, and thanks for your time. I'm aware you're 2 hours ahead of us, so it's getting very late, particularly as a mum of a young child. So thank you for your time and for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for setting it up, Catherine. Thanks, Paola and Gemma, for showing up. Lovely to talk to you again.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Commute.